So now we have our switch connected to our door, but we can't really tell that there's a connection between the two without having to click on the switch itself and look at its properties. We're going to draw a line from the switch to the door that only shows up inside of the editor. We'll be taking advantage of some special methods called gizmos that'll enable us to draw inside of the scene screen. Let's open up our switch and add our first gizmo. As you can see, we'll use a special method called onDrawGizmos that only gets rendered inside of the scene view. Here, we're changing the color value of the gizmo based on whether the switch is sticky or not. Next, let's copy the same for loop we used in the past to iterate through all of the triggers attached to the switch, but instead of toggling the trigger, we're going to draw a line from the switch to the door with the gizmo draw method. We'll need 2 points here, one from the switch and the other to the door. Now let's save our script and go back into Unity. Give it a second to recompile. And now if you click into the scene view, you'll see that we have a red line going from the switch to the door. As you continue to work with the door code, you may notice that we get a warning for the door state. This is because we set this as a private variable, but we never actually ended up using it. But it's still good to keep in case you want to extend the door and want to know where the door's current state is. Now that we see that we don't have any other compiler errors, let's take a look and make sure that our switch actually changes color based on sticky. If we enable and disable sticky mode, you'll see that the color changes from red to green and back again. Now we can save our scene and let's go into the door trigger and add a gizmo to help us visualize the area the player can walk into in order to trigger the door. Just like we did before, let's create our onDrawGizmo method. Here, we'll use the ignore trigger to change the color of the actual box we draw around the door. Next, we'll need to get a reference of the box collider 2D and its position so that we can calculate the size of the box we need to draw around the door. Now we'll need to calculate a new position based on the offset of the center point and the X position of the box collider. Now we're ready to draw the box around the door. Now we'll save our script, go back into Unity, let it recompile, and give the scene focus. Here you'll see we now have a gray area that represents that the trigger for the door is ignored, but this would be where the player can walk into. If we were to select the door trigger itself and uncheck ignore trigger, you'll see we would have a green line, better enabling us to see inside of our game as we lay things out, the state of the door, and where the area is that the player can trigger it. Let's go ahead and set ignore trigger back and save our scene. Now we have a way of drawing objects into the scene itself that'll show us the relation between the game objects we connect up.